God dwells in you. Go ahead and get started. Oh Dios, te rogamos por tu santa Iglesia Católica, llénala de toda verdad, en toda verdad, con toda paz. Donde está corrompida, purificala. Donde esté en error, dirígela. Donde se haya extraviada, reformala. En lo que se justa, fortaleza. De cuanto carezca, provila. Y donde esté dividida, reúnela. Por amor de Jesucristo, tu Hijo nuestro Salvador. Amen. Oh God, we pray for your Holy Catholic Church. Fill it with all truth, in all truth with all peace. Where it is corrupt, purify it. Where it is in error, direct it. Where in anything it is amiss, reform it. Where it is right, strengthen it. Where it is in want, provide for it. Where it is divided, reunite it. For the sake of Jesus Christ, your Son, our Savior. Amen. It is good that we are here this morning. My name is Mike Kinman. I'm the rector here. I want to invite our wardens, Trula Worthy-Clayton, our senior warden, and Dana Jones, our junior warden, up here. And you can sit. You sit right there, and I'll sit here. We can sit down. And I want to sort of jump right into it. We have some other announcements. Please visit the action table before you leave. An important action we have today, urging people not to vote for the budget plan that's currently in Congress. I could go into lots of details, but in short, it's pretty much just an abomination that does horrible things, and you can get details there. It is one of the most contrary political documents to the gospel that I've seen in a while, and that's saying something. So please go over to the action table and sign those letters. We've done this a couple times before. It occurs to us that it's been a little more than a year that we've all been together, and it is good at a regular basis to step back and just listen to each other and say how we're doing. I have a habit of doing things that I call on-the-table forums, and it comes from the basic unit of our life, the center of our life being the Eucharist. And what happens in the Eucharist is we lay our whole lives on the table with Christ. And in doing that, we become this wonderful church that is something greater than each of us is individually. And if we use that model, that whenever something is on our heart, we lay it on the table. It's good regularly to have times for community conversation, where if we have a question, a thought, a dream, we lay it on the table. And it's a time that I wanted to have our wardens up here with me, because they may be questions that we can try to answer and give more information. It may just be things that we need to listen to each other. The one thing I would ask is that whenever someone is talking, try to avoid that. For me, is a huge temptation of not so much listening as trying to figure out what I'm going to say in response. But really deeply listen to each other. And so I've asked each of our wardens just to start off with just a minute or two of reflection on the past year and some thoughts about things that are going on in our common life. And then we really just want to open it up to you. We want to hear from you. We want to engage with you and have us engage with each other. So, Trula, do you want to go first?
Good morning, members, friends, and streamers. This is a great opportunity for us to talk about All Saints 21st Century and to take a reflective look back. Well, if it's reflective, it's back, Trula, but to take a reflective look at what the year has cost us. In the summer of 2016, the then wardens Jason Lyons and Rick Davis announced that the rector would speak at homecoming. And this whole campus was infused with excitement and joy and anticipation. I think it extended even up to Colorado Boulevard. It might have been a little more than just the campus. On that day, with a full capacity crowd, Mike began his first sermon with a joyful heart, a tuneful voice, and freedom on his mind. I recall it all the time. I can make Jason smile just by saying that date. It opens a special place in our heart. We knew we were in for not only exciting ride, but we were in for a great phase of All Saints. So I didn't think it was appropriate to start reflections other than that place. So much has transpired this year. The main elevator, the roof, and a portion of Scott Hall all required extensive repair. And at the same time, we moved bravely in the future by taking the sanctuary lights from where it was to an energy-saving first step into the future. All of this was possible because of the generosity of members and the collaboration between our staff and City Hall right across the street. So we had times that we needed repairs, and we did something great at the same time. The emotional distress resulting from our November 2016 political shock has been amplified by what seems most times like an increasing amount of violence-laced atrocities. The natural and person-influenced disasters and the series of heartbreaking miscarriages of justice have left us just a bit numb. During this period, All Saints has become a safe zone, a source of support, and a beacon of hope and healing for our parishioners and for our community. Sunday services, small group sessions, open listening, and private counseling opportunities have been specially designed to alleviate our collective feeling of hopelessness. Our peace and justice ministries, individual members, the clergy, and the staff serve both as leaders and active participants in organized advocacy, in peaceful protests, and in local vigils. Today, we are embarking upon another of what I call courageous congregational listening sessions. These sessions are used to broadly communicate, answer questions, and gather opinions regarding specific subjects. A few of you here will know I refer to these as timely topics, and you'll remember why. These sessions allow each participant to gather insight and to become familiar with the role cultural and generational differences help form our opinions. It is a safe environment. It is a trusted environment. And it is one in which every participant knows that their contribution is valued, and each point of view will eventually inform the decision that has to be made. You probably remember when we were struggling to make an alcohol policy. We came here and talked to you and received your input. And then there was the time that we were questioning among ourselves if applause during the Sunday service was appropriate. Again, we came here, you gave us your input, and I believe that we still applaud and we still have moments of silence, and it all works because we grew from that conversation. Today we're going to take a look ahead, and we will have to remember that All Saints must remain a beacon in Pasadena, and that we must embrace full, inclusive, radical welcome in order to be prepared for where we're going. I do know one thing, as now, then we will need your full participation, your generous donations, and your loving prayers. In other words, we'll need you.
So this has been a wonderful time to serve as junior warden on the vestry for a lot of the reasons that Trula walked through. It has been during a year in which we received Mike Kinman as our 10th rector, and it's been a joy getting to know Mike and to watch him experience All Saints Church. It's also been a year where we have seen vestry meetings opened up to the parish, with many people taking us up on it, even into the later part of the evening, as well as an increased focus on the role of the vestry as, I made my print too big, as the body that is setting the vision for the parish, serving as the policy-making body of the church, sharing in the spiritual leadership of the church, and also holding fiduciary responsibility for the church's finances. Trula and I have the honor and privilege of meeting each week with Mike, discussing the state of the parish and issues affecting the parish, as well as Mike's transition into the community. This year, among other things, we've been grappling with the continued challenges we face with the church's structural repair, replacement, and retrofitting requirements. The office building, also known as the Rectory, across the way, was last put through plan check with the city of Pasadena in the 1920s. Earthquake codes have changed a bit since then, if you can imagine. We desperately need to retrofit this building to current earthquake codes, as it is the place where most of our staff and a lot of our volunteers work on a regular basis. As well, we continue to have issues with Scott Hall, where our youngest children are greeted each week. There is no potable water in the building, and most of the toilets don't work. Additionally, we still struggle with the space needs identified in our building campaign, which, with the demise of the campaign, remain unmet and equally important. We are also facing a severe crisis of volunteers for our youth group. We need parishioners who are not afraid to talk with middle and high school students, I realize that's a big ask in some ways, to step up and show up on Wednesday nights and on Sunday mornings. There is no required skill set or background, only a willingness to meet the youth where they are and listen to them. And if you don't want a commitment, there really isn't one. You can let Jeremy know that you plan to show up once or multiple times. All participation is welcome. In addition, the Seekers program is perpetually in need of adults to serve as faith partners to the youth going through discernment for confirmation. I think they're still looking for 7, and the program has already started. While the commitment is a regular commitment for a short period of time, the benefits for both the seeker and the faith partner are immeasurable. Please, with all of this going on, and with all of the wonderful things going on as well, I guess I got to be the Debbie Downer of the moment, please continue to hold All Saints Church and its leadership in your prayers as we navigate through these times.
Great, thank you. So I'm thinking in terms of adjusting on the fly. I know our streamers, hi streamers, we're going to have to cut off the stream around 11 o'clock so the crew can get over for 11:15 service. So we can probably stay in here until about 11:10, and then I can dash out. So that gives us about 25 minutes. And most of this is we want to hear from you all. And so do you have a question? Do you have a thought? Do you have a dream, an observation? Because we want to hear from as many people as possible, if you could try to do what's most challenging for me, which is to be succinct, that would be great. And so we want to open it up to you. What do you have to lay on the table? And we have...
Thank you very much. Could you please, I have 2 questions. One is, what the bishop left us in the lurch by not saying what happened to you in court. And I'd like to know that. And the second question is, I noticed the pledging is way behind what the total you're going to need for next year, and how are you going to deal with that if you don't? Do you think you will meet the amount needed?
Do you want me to take? Okay, so let me take take those in order. The first is, and that's I apologize for not communicating about my criminal past and what happened. Really briefly, what happened was I asked for community service. I was granted community service. It was more like traffic court than anything else. This was not a difficult thing. And I'm serving out 12 hours of community service wonderfully at a place I'd wanted to volunteer anyway, which is Learning Works, which is one of our community partners. It's phenomenal. It's a charter school that draws its population from kids who have dropped out, many of whom have been in gangs. And I get to work in a community garden with these great kids. for 12 hours. So that's what happened with that. In terms of finances, for 2017, and this is always dicey to say lest complacency set in, we're actually having our best year in the last 9 years. If you look at the collection, it is ahead of where it has been in previous years. What happens is the total amount collected includes people who give at the end of the year. It does count on generous end-of-the-year giving, which we have always gotten, so we really do need generous end-of-the-year giving to meet that goal. So don't think, oh, that we're doing just fine. As long as we get the same generous end-of-the-year giving that we usually get, we'll be fine. The challenge is next year. And a piece of what's happening, just very briefly, is it's what's happening all over the church, which is the generations that have built and grown the church over the last half century are sort of, what's the tactful way to put it, aging out. And this means moving from employment into retirement. This means that we're having some funerals of people who have meant an incredible amount to the church and who have given an incredible amount to the church. And as new generations are coming in, and we're seeing more young people here, the millennial generation is huge, but its dominant financial characteristic is debt. And so we're going to have to start to think, and we're starting to have these conversations about how are we going to function on a changing financial model. And that means, first of all, to build a bridge to this next era of our life together. That means we're going to be doing an increased emphasis on planned giving. And so a way that for those who have been incredibly supportive during your life of the church, we're going to encourage you to think about things like endowing your pledge in your will. So that support can continue. That'll be hugely important as we build this bridge to the next 30 to 50 years of All Saints Church. So great questions. Thank you.
Thank you. When the celebrant sends out the laity with the sacrament, I would like to suggest saying, "We send you forth," instead of "I send you forth."
Excellent. Everyone know what she's talking about? Okay, great. She's talking about when we send out the lay Eucharistic visitors, and that's right. And the presider is sending, but the presider is sending on behalf of the entire congregation. So "we" is much more appropriate. Good job.
I'm Phil McKeon from Claremont with Deborah. I think I want to speak on behalf of the aging out. Is that what we were describing? Yeah. Okay.
If you got a better term for it, I'd love to hear it.
I think that's great. Maybe aging in. And
Richard Rohr calls it falling upwards. Yeah.
I've noticed that I'm using the ability to use a prayer request card with increasing frequency for friends who are aging and frailing and indeed dying. And I find that to be a really amazing ministry here. I mean, you look at the lists of people that you and all of us pray for coming out of this congregation's heart, and it's a very beautiful and powerful instrument of liturgy and of faith. So I thank all those who are involved in that for doing it on a regular basis. I also thank those who worked on the liturgy to change and include what I call Love's Prayer now, Love's Prayer in Chinese, as well as in Espanol, and of course in English. I think this is really the right direction for us to go, and I encourage us to have other languages from time to time, so we show our inclusiveness in the linguistic style. And finally, I thank those who have been so supportive of those going through changes with memory and memory change, memory loss and memory reflections. And I think a whole new ministry exists for those who are in the coming years and generations will be having dementia, and those of us who are trying to deal with our own dementia or the dementia of those in families. So I look at that as a ethical and theological challenge for us, because it's so easy, as the bishop said, to have ambiguity about how we feel and live with those issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Bob?
Ever since I became aware that sermons don't have titles anymore, I've been curious as to why. I'm not sure that they're certainly not essential, and I'm not sure how informative they are, but I'm curious.
I can speak only for myself, and actually it's fine if other clergy want to do that. It's a very practical thing, which is the bulletin has to go to press on Wednesday, and I'm usually still in the prayer phase of my sermon on Wednesday, and I don't know what, I wouldn't be able to give you a title, and so that, I'm not against titles, it's not capable for me to do them. It's not theological, it is when the thing has to hit the Xerox machine.
Thank you. Alistair Greaves, over here at the back. I just wanted to ask you a question, Mike, about could you say a few words about how we're doing on our cross-cultural, cross-racial embrace in All Saints Church? I'm reminded of Antonio's sermon back in the summer when he talked about, what a warm welcome should look like. So I wondered if you could say a few words about what your thinking is on that and where we're going. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's a continuing journey. It began long before I got here, and I'm sure it will continue. I'm hoping to be here a long time. It'll continue long after I'm gone. My model for this and my dream for this is the Eucharistic model, where we're all gathered around the table and we get to all lay our lives on the table together with Christ. And each of those lives is unique in themselves, and then we also have wonderful cultural expressions. And the model of Christ also is letting go of privilege and power. So those of us who, like me, I'm a perfect example, straight, white, cisgender, able-bodied male, I'm pretty much the dominant in every room I walk into on this planet. And so the model of Christ is for me to not grasp onto that privilege, but instead to yield and to give center stage to those who are more on the margins. Again, like I love Greg Boyle's language of everyone is on the margins until there's no margins left. So how that's doing is like everything else. It's part of what we're trying to do here, which is the first step is listening to each other. And trying to enter, being invited into each other's spaces, entering into those spaces with the spirit of pilgrimage, which is I'm going to be changed. I encourage everyone, if you've never been to, or even if you have, just go to the 1 o'clock service. The first Sunday of the month is bilingual, but also go on Sundays that aren't bilingual. There is something profound about going into a worship setting where if you don't speak Spanish, where it's in a completely different language. I want to lift up particularly the ministry of the women's community, which has done an amazing work with this. And that's has on their own initiative saying we're going to do everything bilingually. Members of the women's community are showing up at the 1 o'clock service. And it is, the goal is to have a balance between marginalized communities' needs for affinity, which are real. It's why, we have groups like the Black Women's Affinity Group. But the ideal is having a community where everyone, whoever they are and wherever they are on their journey of faith, is able to shape the dominant culture of the community. And so the community is reflective of all these cultures without it sort of being a lowest common denominator. It's going to take years to get there, and it's going to be an incredible amount of fun getting there because we're going to have a chance to listen to each other. But it's not so much about sort of technical fixes of, okay, let's put a couple more tables out on the lawn during the 1 o'clock service and then we're done. It is that work of building relationship and growing deeply in community with each other and realizing that when we say God dwells in you, we have the opportunity to experience how God dwells uniquely and differently in each of us in different cultures. So we're on the road, and as Dr. King said, we've come a long, long way, and we've got a long, long way to go. So thanks.
Well, to follow up on the prayer request, I know there's the ones where you do it and it lasts like 4 weeks and down. But I wanted to know about the general ones because I keep hearing Syria each week, but nothing about Yemen and some of the other places that are having major humanitarian crises as well.
Those are decisions that are made in a combination of the folks who put together the prayer list with input from the action it's called the action team, who comes up with the action items. I think I'm getting that wrong. Either Sally or the rapid response team. Thank you. Sally or Juliana, neither one are in the room right now, I think, could correct me on that. Sally, do you want to comment on that, Sally? It was when we pray for, say, Syria, why aren't there there's tons of places in the world where they're suffering. How do those decisions get made? And it's the rapid response team talking.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is the rapid response team, and we also try to talk about it as a staff, but the rapid response team guides us in that way because they are on those things, every day. So, but you can always also email me if you have a particular concern, and we take that into consideration.
Right, and you can fill out a prayer request card with, say, Yemen on there, and that would get into the system. So, thank you.
Mike.
Hey, Carol.
I'm a pledger, not a big one. I do what I can. But I remember Sunday you stood up there and you said if everybody gave $29 more, we would meet this goal. And I went, that's what I spend on coffee a week or 2 weeks. So I came out and I found, was it you, Jeremy? And I said, how do I up my pledge $29? So I just thought that was an innovative, and I don't know how much money you got from that, but it's an attainable goal for those of us that don't have a lot to pledge, but want to be a part of the pledging community. And the other thing you've done, besides many wonderful things, is you inspired me to learn Spanish. And that's my goal for 2017 and 18 is to learn Spanish. And I'm grateful for that.
Wonderful. I use something called Duolingo, and I do 20 minutes a day. And then I tell you what, best thing for my learning Spanish, going to the 1 o'clock service. It's been great. Thank you. Hey, Nancy.
Yes. I just want to thank you for, Mike, for your poetic gift. The way you shape your sermons always helps to deepen my spiritual life. You have a real gift, and I'm thankful for that.
Thank you, and sermons are not artifacts that are sort of spun in the mind of the preacher. At least they shouldn't be. Sermons are creations of the whole community. So anything that I or Sally or Susan or Bishop Taylor or anyone is able to put out there, it's because of what we are hearing from the community. And our job is really to take that and to take the scriptural story and to synthesize that and really to go to God and say, God, what word do you have for this? And I will say my experience of preaching in the context of this community the last year has been one of the most powerful preaching experiences of my life, and it's because of the remarkable way the Holy Spirit moves in this community. And so, I will say thank you, praise God, and that also is a reflection of the power of this community. So thanks.
If no one's taking the mic, I have a question for you.
Great.
So I know...
And Trula and Dana, too.
It's easy for us to... This one's for you.
Okay.
It's easy for us to see the ways in which you're changing us, and things are changing. In the year that you've been here, have you found ways in which we as a community have changed you, or have opened your mind or changed your mind about things?
No, absolutely. That's a great question.
I know the answer to this. But.
No, it is. And actually, I've been thinking about this the last couple weeks. I'm trying to think, how do I make this brief, which is hard for me, there is a profound commitment in this congregation to welcoming people of all faiths and of people who I'd even identify as atheist or struggle with faith or agnostic. And it is one of the things that really drew me here to All Saints. At the same time, I come from a mixed faith background as a family. And at the same time, I have chosen a Christian faith and to follow Jesus Christ in my life. And we're a Christian church, and we have the Eucharist as the central form of worship that we have. And I found that an exhilarating tension. And it's interesting for me to come into a community. Every other community I've ever been in, I've been the most unorthodox person there. And here I find myself like sometimes being cast in the role of the traditionalist, which is just wonderful for me. And what it's causing me to really just be expanded by is, I absolutely believe it's, I'm called to follow Jesus. It does not, I've never believed that for a path to be right for me, it has to be right for everyone, or a path is wrong for someone else. Which enables me to just have, I have wonderful siblings who are Jewish, Muslim, Baha'i, Sikh, Hindu, who I learn an incredible amount from, and I aspire to the depth of their faith, and have, I'm not even saying this well, and it just is a piece of why I'm sort of like being pushed by this congregation, of absolutely saying, I still believe, I definitely believe that there is something to walking that path of Christ and walking it deeply, and that there is something that is challenging about if our interfaith nature is, well, I'm going to take part from one from column A, one from column B, one from column C, one from column D, and construct something that is sort of comfortable for me. That's problematic for me. But I'm seeing more of the ability, and you all are teaching me this, that I can be deeply Christian, and there are aspects of other faiths that I can not only respect, but that I can incorporate into my Christianity. And I have to sort of watch my own ego in that, because I'm really capable of just saying, I'm going to take this because it makes me comfortable, and it reinforces the stuff I like. But you all are really, shaping me. The decisions you have all made, liturgically, are profound. And we don't do the creed on most Sunday services. I'm actually a big believer in the creed. And I know this congregation has gone through a big process of congregation and study. You didn't just wake up one morning and say, that's it with the creed. And I know I need to learn from that, and let my own view of the creed be shaped by the history of this congregation and the conversations you've already had, and maybe we have a new conversation together. So I don't know if I'm answering this well, but just theologically, I guess it's sort of the reverse of what you were saying, Nancy. As much and I'm grateful for what you said about how I'm helping you all grow spiritually. Y'all are helping me grow spiritually, and it's just wonderful, and I thank you for it. So keep it going. Hey, Elizabeth.
Are we still in the process of working on diversifying our imagery? I know you've put out a call for that, and you did get a lot of response, but I didn't know where that was at this point.
It is, and that is a huge dream of mine, and part of it is the cover of the service leaflet you see this morning. We have a wonderful young man in our youth program, Jaden, who is doing our service leaflet covers once a month. I would love to find, part of this is just, how do we get this done? For example, I would love to find what I call a historically accurate Madonna and Child in a large icon that we can display during Advent. Part of it was having the Dia de los Muertos altars up on All Saints' Day is a way of diversifying those images. I would love to be able to more and more use the artistic talents that are in this congregation that particularly come from different cultures and use things like the service leaflet cover, which is kind of a blank canvas for us. And how do we do that? And so the short answer is yes. It's slow work. It's probably slower than it should be because it's really important. One of the things I'm aware of is there is a way, not just a way, white images of Jesus do violence to people of color. And we need to look at our life the same way that National Cathedral is having conversations and places are removing images of Robert E. Lee. It literally is the same conversation of having white Jesuses. And so, I thank you for that, and yeah, we probably need to front burner that more than it has been front burnered. Thank you. We have one more. It's 11:10, and the train's going to leave without me at 11:15.
When we were reciting the Our Father, a voice behind me said, "Our Mother." And I was thinking of, as we're talking about gender differences, racial differences, has it ever been considered to say, "Our Father, Mother, who art in heaven"?
And that's, first of all, one of the things I love about sort of the language of our heart, and it's opening up this conversation, is for anyone to do that, which is wonderful. And part of why we included Spanish and Simple Mandarin is we realized that, okay, we're saying the language of our heart, but we're only printing English. And so what does that say about the community? And we could end up with sort of these like 5 pages of possible Lord's Prayers, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, although it might take some time to sort through. What you're raising is, yes, I think we need to have these conversations, and beyond even father, mother, that raises the issue of gender binaries. And how, and again, it exposes what we're doing in prayer, which is amazing, is we're inherently trying to express the unexpressible. And so where we find, at least what I believe, where we find God in terms of gender, is God exists on every point on the gender spectrum, and God exists outside of the gender spectrum. And so, we're in a point right now where we're discovering that things like gender and sexuality are far more complex than binaries. And you go through the gospel, and Jesus just loved smashing binaries. And so the question that you ask, I think, yeah, we could do that. What's even more interesting for me is not saying, okay, let's have a technical solution of doing that. That's a pretty good technical solution. But let's start opening up the whole conversation about all the different binaries that we live by. It's why, I try to use words like siblings, or I talk about men, women, and gender nonconforming persons. And so, yeah, the Lord's Prayer is a great, interesting way to start, and I think that's worth absolutely looking at. And what does it mean in lots of different ways in our life to start looking at where do we fall into binary thinking, and realize that as we learn more about God and as we learn more about creation, we find that things are much more along a spectrum than along binaries. So thanks, that was a great question. It is 11:12, and I have to get vested and into church in 3 minutes. So thank you all. We'll do this again, and thank you too. Sorry.